The mansion stood like a monument of wealth, tall windows reflecting the fading sun, golden gates locked against the world outside. Inside lived a man who had everything money could buy, but nothing that truly mattered. The billionaire had built empires, bought power, and silenced rivals, yet his house was filled with a silence that pierced deeper than any boardroom defeat. His son, the only heir to his fortune, had not spoken a word since birth. Doctors came and went, specialists from across the globe, each promising hope and leaving him with despair. The boy's voice was a mystery locked away, and every passing year only deepened the father's helplessness. One evening, after dismissing yet another therapist who failed to reach the boy, the billionaire sat in his grand study, whiskey in hand, staring into the flames. His advisors pressed him to hire more staff, people who could manage the boy's daily needs. Reluctantly, he agreed to employ a maid who would tend to the child, keep him company, and handle the small details others ignored. To him, it was a matter of convenience, not healing. He did not expect miracles anymore. She arrived quietly, with lowered eyes and a simple uniform. To the staff, she was nothing remarkable, just another servant added to the endless list of employees. But the boy noticed her immediately. While others looked at him with pity or frustration, she looked at him with warmth, as though she saw something no one else could. On her first day, instead of cleaning the playroom, she sat on the carpet beside him, gently placing toys in front of him, waiting, watching, studying him with a care far beyond her duties. The boy, withdrawn from the world, hesitated at first, but something in her presence soothed him. She didn't rush him, didn't command him, didn't sigh in disappointment like so many before. She simply stayed by his side in silence, her smile soft and patient. Slowly, his small hands reached for the toy she held out. It was the first time in months he had willingly connected with another person. Days passed and their bond grew. The staff noticed how the boy followed her like a shadow, clinging to her apron, seeking her whenever fear overcame him. At night, she whispered softly to him, not just words but sounds, rhythms, humming lullabies that seemed to stir something buried deep inside him. The billionaire saw this from afar with indifference at first. To him, she was doing her job. But there was something unusual in her way, too skilled, too deliberate, as if every gesture had a deeper meaning. One night, as she tucked the boy into bed, she leaned closer and whispered a single sound, encouraging him to repeat. His lips trembled, his eyes filled with determination, but no sound came. She brushed his hair back, kissed his forehead, and whispered again, promising him he could do it, promising she would never give up. And for the first time in years, the boy fell asleep, smiling. The following weeks changed the rhythm of the mansion. Where once the halls echoed with silence, now faint laughter and soft sounds began to appear. The boy, who had hidden himself in corners, now spent his afternoons in the playroom with the maid. She never forced him, but gently guided him, pointing at objects, forming her lips into shapes, encouraging him to mimic. Sometimes he failed, sometimes he grew frustrated, but she never scolded him. She clapped for every attempt, hugged him when he tried, and whispered encouragement until he smiled again. The staff whispered among themselves. They had seen countless therapists come and go, each leaving with disappointment etched on their faces. Yet this maid, with no official role beyond dusting and cleaning, seemed to succeed where the world's best doctors had failed. They noticed how she kept a small notebook tucked into her apron, scribbling quietly whenever she thought no one was watching. They wondered what she wrote, but no one dared ask. The billionaire, however, was not blind. At dinner one evening, as he watched, his son giggled softly when the maid entered the room. Something stirred inside him. His boy, who had refused to eat at the table for years, now sat willingly, his tiny hand reaching for a spoon as she encouraged him. The billionaire's chest tightened at the sight. He had spent millions for such progress and received nothing. Yet here was a simple maid bringing life back into his child. It unsettled him deeply. Late that night, unable to shake the thought, he wandered the mansion's halls until he reached the playroom. The lights were still on, and inside he saw her sitting cross-legged on the floor, practicing speech exercises with the boy. She exaggerated sounds, touched her throat to show vibration, tapped his lips softly to guide him. The boy leaned close, determined, his little mouth struggling to form the sound. A small whisper escaped him, fragile and almost inaudible, but it was there. The maid gasped softly, clapped her hands, and hugged him tightly. The boy's eyes sparkled with joy. The billionaire froze outside the doorway, his heart pounding. He had just heard it. A sound, small but real, from his son's lips. For a moment he wanted to step inside, to thank her, to embrace them both. But suspicion shadowed his gratitude. Who was she really? No maid could know these techniques. No servant could teach what countless specialists had failed to achieve. He stepped back into the shadows, his jaw clenched, questions swirling in his mind. In her small room later that night, she sat with her notebook open, scribbling observations. She wrote about the boy's progress, the exercises that worked, the sounds he attempted, her medical handwriting precise and professional. Then she closed the notebook and pressed it to her chest, her eyes filled with tears. She whispered to herself, "You can do this, little one. I'll make sure the world hears you." But she also knew the risk. If the billionaire discovered the truth about who she really was, everything might fall apart. Still, she couldn't stop. The boy's voice mattered more than her secret, more than her fear. The billionaire's thoughts became restless. At board meetings, he found himself distracted, papers blurred before his eyes, numbers meaningless compared to the image of his son whispering that fragile sound in the playroom. For years he had prayed to hear his boy speak, and now it had happened. But not because of him, not because of the expensive specialists he had hired. It was because of her. The maid. His suspicion deepened. He began to watch her more closely, silently observing from hidden corners of the mansion. He noticed how carefully she structured each moment with the boy, how her methods were too refined to be instinctive. The way she used rhythm, how she tapped on objects, how she guided the boy's breathing. It was the work of someone trained, someone educated, someone with years of knowledge, not a maid. One afternoon, he found himself outside, the playroom again. She sat at the piano, playing a slow tune, the boy seated beside her. Each note carried patience, each chord matched with a soft sound. She encouraged him to repeat. The boy tried, his voice shaky, almost a whisper, but she cheered as though he had performed a miracle. The billionaire felt something crack inside. Him. A strange mixture of pride, hope, and anger swirled in his chest. Pride for his son, hope for his progress, anger at the woman who dared to deceive him. That night, he ordered his staff to investigate her. He demanded every detail of her background, every reference, every piece of paper she had submitted. But the information came back thin, too thin. A false name on a previous employer, a vague reference, no trace of family. It was as if she had erased her past. His temper boiled. He stormed into the east wing where her room was located. She wasn't there. The door was unlocked, the lamp still burning, her apron neatly folded on the chair. On the table lay her notebook. His hand trembled as he picked it up, opening it to pages filled with detailed notes, diagnoses, medical terms, sketches of speech pathways, developmental milestones, therapy techniques. The handwriting was steady, professional, exact. He turned, the pages faster, his eyes widening with every line. This wasn't the work of a maid. This was the work of a doctor. His heart pounded with betrayal. She had lied to him, entered his house under false pretenses, hidden her identity. Yet as he read her words, he also saw something else, her devotion to his son. She wrote not like a scientist studying a subject, but like a mother protecting her child. He smiled today when he tried the sound, Ma. His eyes lit up. He's ready. I will not give up on him. The billionaire's hands tightened on the notebook, his breath uneven. He felt torn apart. Anger screamed for him to throw her out, to expose her lies, to protect his son from whatever game she was playing. But a softer voice whispered that she was the only one who had reached his boy, the only one who had given him hope. At that very moment, he heard footsteps in the hall. She entered the room, her eyes falling instantly on the notebook in his hands. Her face went pale, her body frozen in fear. For a long second, no one moved. Then his voice thundered, low and sharp, shaking the silence. "Who are you?" Her lips trembled as his words cut through the air. She took a step forward, her hands clasped tightly in front of her, but her eyes never left the notebook he gripped like a weapon. "Please," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Let me explain." His jaw clenched, his eyes sharp and burning with betrayal. "You lied to me. You walked into my home under false pretenses, touched my son's life, and deceived everyone. Who are you, really?" Tears welled in her eyes, spilling over as she lowered her head. "I am not who I said I was. I am a doctor, a speech therapist. Years ago, I was respected in my field. Families trusted me. Children found their voices through me. But then, I was accused of malpractice. It was false, a lie born from jealousy and greed. But it destroyed me. My license was revoked, my name dragged through the mud, and I lost everything. No one would hire me again, not as a doctor, not as a teacher, nothing." Her voice cracked, her shoulders shaking. "So I hid. I took whatever work I could find, and when I came here, I swore I would just clean, just serve. But when I saw your son..." She broke, pressing her hand over her mouth as sobs rose in her throat. "I couldn't ignore him. I knew I could help." The billionaire's breath was ragged, torn between fury and disbelief. He wanted to shout at her, to throw her out. But the image of his son's trembling lips forming his first sounds replayed again and again in his mind. "So you used him," he spat bitterly. "You made my child your experiment." She looked up sharply, pain flashing in her eyes. "No, never. He is not an experiment. He is a little boy who has been waiting for someone to listen to him, someone to believe he can do more than the world thinks. I didn't use him. I loved him. Every lesson, every exercise, every word I spoke to him came from love, not ambition." Her voice grew steadier, stronger, though tears streamed down her face. "I would never risk his happiness. He is more than a patient to me. He is my hope." For a long, tense moment, silence filled the room. The billionaire's chest rose and fell with unsteady breaths, his hand trembling as it gripped the notebook. Then, from the doorway, a fragile sound broke the tension. Both turned sharply. The boy stood there, clutching his stuffed toy, his wide eyes brimming with confusion and fear. His lips quivered. And then, softly, imperfectly, he whispered, "Da, da." The notebook slipped from the billionaire's hand, hitting the floor with a thud. His heart stopped, his body shaking as he stared at his son. "Say it again," he whispered, his voice breaking. The boy stepped forward, his little hand reaching for him, his voice clearer this time. "Da, da." The billionaire fell to his knees, tears spilling down his face as he pulled his son into his arms. Over the boy's shoulder, his eyes met hers. No words passed between them, but the truth was undeniable. She had given him back his son. The mansion felt different the next morning. The air no longer carried the heavy silence that had haunted its halls for years. Instead, there was a warmth, fragile yet undeniable, born from the sound of a little boy's voice. The billionaire sat at the breakfast table, his son beside him, staring with wide eyes at the woman across from them. She kept her head lowered, her hands folded neatly in her lap, afraid to meet his gaze. He could not stop thinking about the night before. The sound of da, da still echoed in his chest, filling a place he thought would remain empty forever. Yet alongside gratitude was anger, confusion, and something else he dared not name. She had lied to him, yes, but she had also given him a gift no one else could. His heart wrestled with itself, torn between punishment and forgiveness. The boy solved what the father could not. He left his chair and toddled over to her, tugging gently at her sleeve. She looked down, startled, as he whispered another shaky sound. "Ma." Her eyes filled with tears instantly, her hands covering her mouth as she struggled not to sob. The billionaire's throat tightened as he watched. His son had spoken again, not just to him, but to her. And in that moment, he understood. This was no deception born of malice. This was love. Later, in the garden, he found her standing by the fountain, staring at the rippling water as though searching for courage. He approached slowly, his voice quieter than she had ever heard it. "Why didn't you tell me the truth?" She turned, her face pale, her eyes rimmed with red. "Because I thought you'd throw me out, because I knew no one would trust me again, and because I didn't want to lose him. Helping your son was the only time in years I felt like myself again." He studied her in silence, every wall he had built around his heart crumbling piece by piece. "You risked everything to help him." She nodded, her voice trembling. "I would do it again. Even if you send me away today, I'll never regret what I did for him." Before he could answer, the boy appeared between them, holding both their hands in his tiny fingers. He looked up, his lips quivering, determination burning in his eyes. Slowly, painfully, he formed the word that would shatter them both. Me. Lie. Her breath caught in her throat, tears blinding her vision. The billionaire dropped to his knees, pulling the boy close, his voice breaking. "Yes, son. Family." He looked up at her, his face raw with emotion, his voice stripped of pride. "Stay, please. We need you. I need you." From that day forward, the mansion was no longer silent. The boy's voice grew stronger, each word a victory, each laugh a miracle. The billionaire, once a man hardened by grief, discovered a softer part of himself, guided by the woman he once called a maid, but who had revealed herself to be so much more. And she, once lost in shadows, found her place again, not as a servant, not even as a hidden doctor, but as part of a family reborn from silence.